Cigarette smoking causes over 480,000 deaths each year. We are fully aware today that cigarettes can cause a multitude of health-related issues such as lung cancer, heart disease, stomach ulcers and stroke. But what if I told you that there was a time when cigarette was seen as good for you and were prescribed to patients when they visited the doctor? You must be wondering, how is that possible, knowing what you know today about cigarettes? For the answer we have to take a trip to the early 20th century to see how cigarette became good for you and why it is now being linked to life-threatening illnesses. Now, I know I said that to get the answer we have to travel to the early 20th century, but we're going to go back a little bit further to the 1880s. That was when we started to see a production boom in cigarette for the tobacco companies. Due to the newly invented Bonsack machine, they were able to produce cigarette more faster and cheaper than before. Before the Bonsack machine was invented, tobacco companies had to hire professionals who were skilled in rolling cigarettes by hand, whereas the professional rollers were rolling 250,000 cigarettes daily. The Bonsack machine could roll 20,000 cigarettes every minute. With them now having way more cigarettes on their hand than before, the way they used to promote their cigarettes weren't going to work anymore, because all the persons that would buy a cigarette are already customers, so they needed to come up with a plan to get non-smokers to start smoking and to buy their product. And that leads me to why you clicked on the video. Let's talk about when cigarette was good for you. One way tobacco companies sought to increase their profit and get all the extra cigarettes off their hands was to tout the supposed health benefits of smoking cigarettes, and their marketing ploy worked. From the 1930s to the 1950s, you could see advertisements about cigarettes claiming that it could give you good breath, aid with weight loss, good for head cold, bronchial irritations, and asthma. Aren't you surprised they didn't proclaim cigarettes as the elixir of life the way they were touting it around back then? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I'd seen a report claiming that smoking a pack of cigarette a day makes you live longer. Tobacco companies such as Marlboro, Camel, and Lucky Strike marketed their products aggressively, using catchy slogans and attractive ads to appeal to a wider audience. One of the most famous campaigns was the "More Doctors Smoke Camels" ad, which claimed that Camel cigarettes were the preferred choice of doctors. Another ad from the 1930s featured a doctor endorsing Chesterfield cigarettes, saying that they were kind to your throat. And yes, why wouldn't they hire doctors? Doctors are seen as experts in this field, so if you want what you're saying to sound more believable, just hire a doctor, and those who were once on the fringes about it will start believing everything, and you just add another lifetime customer to your bottom line. With the doctors in their back pocket, they got them to conduct research on the benefits of cigarette. Of course, this research was heavily biased and often falsified. After they've gotten the results they wanted, they needed a way to make the public to know about the research they've done and the findings from it. And what better way to do so than plastering it everywhere, from billboards, to magazines, and even on the radio. And it worked. Cigarette sales soared, and people began to believe that cigarettes were not only harmless but actually good for you. They also got celebrities involved. One well-known actress at the time, Marlene Dietrich, was featured in an advert for Lucky Strike cigarettes, claiming that she smokes a smooth cigarette. To secure their empire, they came up with the Tobacco Industry Research Committee, established in 1954. This committee was supposed to investigate the health effects of cigarette, but its real purpose was to cast doubt on the growing evidence linking smoking to lung cancer. The committee's findings were widely publicized, and tobacco companies used them to claim that the science on smoking was still uncertain. But we all know that what goes up must come down, and by the 1950s and 60s, the tide was turning. More and more real and unbiased research were being done, and new findings were emerging that linked smoking to serious health problems, including lung cancer and heart disease. In 1964, the U.S. Surgeon General finally issued a landmark report that declared smoking a leading cause of lung cancer and other diseases. And that marked the beginning of the end of the "cigarettes are good for you" myth. By the 1970s, the tide had turned completely. Doctors were no longer endorsing cigarettes, and the public was beginning to wake up to the dangers of smoking. In 1965, the U.S. government introduced warning labels on cigarette packs. And tobacco companies were forced to also disclose the ingredients in their products.